Wow, recording in progress is such a powerful thing. Well, welcome back to our second meeting of the Faculty Senate. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize that it's Hispanic Latino American Heritage Month that started on September 15th. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge. I called this meeting to order at 3:03 p.m. on September 19th, 2023. Roll is taken by means of sign-in sheet that's out there. So please be sure you sign in. If you're an alternate, please sign in next to the name of the person you're replacing today. The following people are the alternates. Jonathan Snow for Akeem Harmon, Ed Bush for Haley Dozier, Michael Holt for Michael Russo, Judith Sylvester for Bob Mann, Jacqueline Hatfield for Ryan Hulteen, Sherry Johnson for John Bardis, Femi Olarode for Mayank Tyagi, Cassandra Glaspie for Matthew Hyatt. Are there any other alternates that I haven't called? Okay, wonderful. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum? Okay, perfect. So the minutes were emailed to you via email, obviously via email, from our August 28th meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes? Okay, second, then, yeah. Are there any corrections or any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? Okay, the minutes pass. So we have several, actually we have one guest today at our meeting. It's Stephen Beck, who's Associate Vice President from ORED. He'll be joining us towards the end of the meeting to discuss items related to new state and federal laws about research security. There are no public comments registered for today's meeting. We're going to move on to the faculty president's report. Dear senators, I hope that you have settled into your fall semester and your classes are going smoothly. Since our last meeting in August, there are several items that I think would be of interest to you. The first item deals with Board of Supervisors meeting and Council of Faculty Advisors, better known as COFA. The LSU Council of Faculty Advisors, which is created by LSU PM 24, has representatives from each campus within the LSU system: A&M, Ag Center, Alexandria, Eunice, Health Center, New Orleans, Pennington, and Shreveport, and presents a report directly to the Board of Supervisors at each of their meetings. Following passage of a Faculty Senate resolution last year, I, as Faculty Senate President, serve as the LSU A&M representative to the Council of Faculty Advisors, and Vice President Tirone serves as my alternate. On September 8th, we both attended the COFA meeting. I was elected chair and provided the opportunity to present the report from our campus to the board. The report addressed a number of issues, including thanking the board for its financial support for our graduate students, the recent top-notch promotion and tenure ceremony hosted by Academic Affairs at the Capitol Park Museum in downtown, and the soon-to-be-established Provost Steering Committee on AI I mentioned it in my president's report last month. The main thrust of the report, however, was to highlight the great initiatives and research occurring on our campus while we continue to carry the stain of AAUP censures. I underscored that LSU is the only flagship institution on the censure list with double censures, which has a profound negative effect upon the way we are perceived nationally and abroad. I explained that we feel that these censures imposed for decisions made by prior administrations before many, if not all, board members had joined the board is not consistent with the scholarship first institution. I have already contacted AAUP with a proposed plan and will be hearing from them soon. I will keep you apprised of the development. The second item is graduate student evaluations. The Faculty Senate Executive Committee was recently contacted by a number of faculty who were concerned that what they viewed as an administratively complex process to annually review graduate students, which was detailed in an email from the Pinky Gordon Lane Graduate School to all faculty on August 18th. Though this process is required by PS 21, the faculty were concerned about the amount of time and information which were required to complete the form and noted that some could possibly run afoul of our IT policies. The FSEC has extended an invitation to meet with representatives from the graduate school to get to the bottom of this compliance and to see if there's any other less onerous way to comply with PS 21. We actually have someone come to meet with us on September 25th on Monday, and I will keep you posted on that. Committee on Committees. Our monthly broadcast email kicked off on September 7th. In it, you probably found familiar format of President's Report, what every faculty needs to know, and other pertinent items. I'd like to especially bring to your attention the last item in that broadcast email, which was a request from the Committee on Committees regarding vacancies on various Faculty Senate committees. Please revisit that email and see if you or a colleague would be interested in serving on any of the committees. I should say that they have filled most of the vacancies, like about 22 of them. However, among the remaining vacancies are on Adjudication Committee and Appeals Committee. Those are going to be voted by us here on the Senate. So please either self-nominate or please just budge a colleague to to serve on these committees. They're really important. This work is important and contributes to the strength of our shared governance. The chair of the Committee on Committees is Louay Mohammed. That was noted in my broadcast email, so his information is there. So please contact him directly. If you have any trouble, you can email me. Luncheon with new senators. On September 6th, we held a successful new senator orientation luncheon at the club. 17 new senators were present along with the FSEC members. Vice President Dan Tirone and I led the presentation involving the structure of Faculty Senate, senators' responsibilities, and open meetings law. The presentation was followed by a lively discussion. We hope to keep this tradition alive, which we initiated last fall. The new Senator Orientation Luncheon aims to strengthen faculty's voices and their crucial role in shared governance. Finally, luncheon with Faculty Senate committee chairs. We will be replicating a similar lunch next week. On September 26th, we'll be holding an orientation for all chairs of our standing and ad hoc committees. The aim is to review our committee's operating procedures and remind everyone about following open meetings law. I will be leading the orientation and will be joined by some members of the FSEC. I look forward to continuing to strengthen faculty governance. Please keep sending me your concerns as you are our eyes and ears. We are stronger together. Thank you. Are there any questions about my report? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to the next items. It's unfinished business, Resolution 2304, proposed increase to faculty instructor salaries in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, sponsored by Lauren Coates, AO. Tracy, if you don't mind just coming up here. Yeah, sure.
President Bazayev, in light of the recent funds provided to Humanities and Social Sciences by the Provost for the purpose of instructor raises and the other sponsors, I ask permission to withdraw the motion to adopt Resolution 2304.
Unless there's an objection, The motion is withdrawn. We need a motion, I think, from the floor. That's it? Oh, perfect. Less than 30 seconds.
That's
Good
right.
job. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to the fun part of today is to elect our new member at large. So we have two nominees, Mehdi Farasat from engineering and Michelle Osborne from VetMed. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Yeah, we vote on that? There's a second. Okay. So all those in favor to close the nominations? Say aye. Against? Okay, the motion passes. So now I will invite for bios. Yeah, and let's go by in alphabetical order. I'm going to invite our two nominees to come to the podium and make their case. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon.
Is it on? Yeah. Go a little bit.
Good afternoon.
You can
Is
use
it
it.
on?
I
Can you hear
think
me?
it's on. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it's on. Yeah.
All right. Just for those who didn't get a chance to read the bio, just very shortly, my name is Mehdi Farasat. I'm an associate professor in the Division of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I joined LSU in August 2014, so this is basically my 10th year at LSU. So within our department, I've served on committees both on graduate and undergrad side. I've served on graduate admissions committee, graduate studies committee. Also on undergrad side, I've served on the curriculum committee and also served on two search committees for recruiting faculty in the power area, which is my specialty. If I want to explain why I would want to be a part of the executive committee, just basically goes back to the fact why I decided to run for the Senate, because I wanted to be a part of the representation of the faculty to the Senate, which is again a representation to the university officials and having a voice in institutional governance. And executive committee is also like one step maybe ahead that at the forefront of representation of the Senate to the university officials. So basically, I would like to be sort of a voice of our faculty, especially the Senate, in issues that are related to, and by definition, the Senate may have better cases in educational policies or authority, but I also am sort of very, let's say, aligned with some of the issues that President Bazayev raises in her reports, the issues related to academic freedom, and also the issue of salaries at LSU. So if I get elected, I would also commit myself to really help this agenda. And of course, again, hopefully receiving more input from the Senate, which again, hopefully everyone is representing their own respective units in the Senate. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I teach at the School of Veterinary Medicine. I have a large teaching component. About 80 to 90% of my faculty appointment is in teaching. The other part is largely in service. And of course, I have some humble research that I do. That is, you would say, my lifeblood. I'm going to go off track a little bit from the statement I provided and instead try to explain some of my thoughts on why I think the Faculty Senate is so important and serving in any way that you can to help the voice of the faculty. I successfully coordinate team-taught courses at the vet school. Right now, the course that I'm coordinating has 14 faculty members and 2 TAs. Those faculty members are from all of the basic sciences, and we are quite unique in the way that we think, the training that we've had, and the experiences that we bring to the table. So you can imagine getting all of them under one kind of idea and having us move forward can be a little bit tricky. I also have long-standing cross-disciplinary collaborations with everyone from anthropologists and artists to pathologists and theoretical and medical physicist. So getting everyone on one page when we come from such disparate areas can be tricky. And this is one of the things that over the years I've become better and better at doing. It's not to say there isn't a long way to go with that. While we have, as academics, whatever our level or track, we are strong critical thinkers and hard workers who have earned a voice in academia. Whether our collective voice is actually weaker now or has simply been drowned out by the louder voices of those in power, and often I can see both sides of that coin, we do still have a voice. The difficulty is knowing when and how to use that voice, whether it's appropriate to speak up with conviction or to approach with a sense of collaboration. If elected as member at large of the executive committee, I would bring to the committee a thoughtful and empathetic mentality and a willingness to speak strongly or to work quietly with purpose as each individual situation warrants. And thank you for your consideration.
We now move to the vote, correct? And Param is going to do the roll call because we follow open meetings laws. When your name is called, so either say Farasat or Osborne. Or what? Or present or past. So you don't have to, you can abstain, right? Yeah, past means you can go back at the end. He should talk.
Okay, so I'm going to take a roll call, and as President Bazayev explained, like when your name comes up, you have choices here. You can say yay, you can say like Farasat or Osborne, or you can also say abstain or pass. So abstain would mean that you are not voting for anyone, and the pass means at this particular moment you are not voting for anyone, but I will make a note of you and I will come back to you if you want to vote again at the end of the election. Okay, so let us, the other thing is that I'm not going to take the names of the alternates, so I hope like every alternate knows like whom you are alternating for. So just the name of the main senator. I'm going to do it twice. For example, like if I take my name, Param Singh, let us say pass, Param Singh, pass. So it will be twice. So if I make any mistake in pronunciation, I already apologize for that. I'll do my best, okay? And also, if I miss somebody's name accidentally in the end, please tell me in the end that your name was not called, and we will do that vote again. Okay, Achut Adhikari. Achut Adhikari Farasat. Lily Allen. Lily Allen Osborne. Kayunish Aryana. Kayunish Aryana Osborne. Scott Baldridge. Scott Baldridge Osborne. Maria Bampasido. Maria Bampasido Osborne. John Bag. John Bag Osborne. Stan Barrera. Stan Barrera Osborne. Gerald Baumgartner. Gerald Baumgartner. Absent. Brett Boutwell.
Osborne.
Brett Boutwell Osborne. James Canfield. Yeah, I think we can't count that vote, right? No, no, you cannot be proxy for him because you are senator. Yours. Yes. That's okay. I'm sorry, like we'll have to. James Canfield, right? Okay, let's continue. Yan Chen. Yan Chen Osborne. John Church. John Church Osborne. Fabio Del Piero. Fabio Del Piero, absent. Ray Diamond. Ray Diamond Osborne. Kerry Dooley. Kerry Dooley, absent. Thomas Stoddart. Abstain. Thomas Stoddart, abstained. Hallie Douzier. Hallie Douzier as an alternate at Bush. Hallie Douzier, absent. Mehdi Farasat. Mehdi Farasat. Farasat. Matthew Freeman. Matthew Freeman. Matthew Freeman, absent. Lisa Fulls. Lisa Fulls Osborne. Meredith Gaglio. Meredith Gaglio Osborne. Janine Grodeski. Janine Grodeski Osborne. Roy Heidelberg. Roy Heidelberg, absent. Ashim Herman. Ashim Herman Osborne. Matthew Hyatt. Matthew Hyatt, abstain. Ryan Hulteen. Ryan Hulteen Osborne. Kareem Johari. Kareem Johari, abstain. Kyla Kazushek. I'm sorry? Farasat. Thank you. Farasat. Revati Kumar. Revati Kumar Farasat. Tracy Lee Blank. Tracy Lee Blank Farasat. Joseph Lagoria. Joseph Lagoria, abstain. Ken Lopata. Ken Lopata Osborne. James Madden. James Madden Osborne. Bob Mann. Bob Mann Osborne. Paul Manthe. Paul Manthe Osborne. Sarah Matthews. Sarah Matthews, absent. Carmela Matza. Carmela Matza Osborne. Marcia Newcomer. Marcia Newcomer, absent. Wayne Newhouser. Wayne Newhouser Osborne. Michelle Osborne. Michelle Osborne, abstain. Patricia Keras Williams. Patricia Keras Williams, absent. Leonard Ray. Leonard Ray, absent. Molly Redfield. Molly Redfield Osborne. Jeffrey Rowland. Jeffrey Rowland Osborne. Sarah Pepin Rosser. Sarah Pepin Rosser Osborne. Rosemary Peter Hills. Rosemary Peter Hills, absent. Michael Russo. Michael Russo, pass. Subramaniam Sathivel. Subramaniam Sathivel Farasad. Ingmar Shogel. Ingmar Shogel Farsad. Edward Shihada. Edward Shihada Osborne. Param Singh, abstain. Param Singh, abstain. Paul Soto. Paul Soto, absent. Brenton Stewart. Brenton Stewart, absent. Chow Sun. Chow Sun, abstain. Chow Sun, abstain. Michelle Todd. Michelle Todd, absent. Mayank Tyagi. Mayank Tyagi Farasad. Adriano Vata. Adriano Vata Osborne. Paulo Waltrich. Paulo Waltrich Farasad. Kathy Williams. Kathy Williams Osborne. Jianan Wu. Jianan Wu. Oh, sorry. Should go down. Are you? No, this one. I'm sorry, I don't recognize every person. Okay, Jianan Wu, absent. Yejun Wu. Yejun Wu Osborne. Alison Zhao. Alison Zhao Farsad. Jun Zhao. Jun Zhao Osborne. Okay, so now there were few passes. Michael Russo. Michael Russo Osborne. Was there any other pass? Well, let me ask again. Was there any other pass? Then we'll close the voting now. Okay, no other passes. Is there anyone whose name was not called? Okay, so I think we are done with the ballot and we have to wait for the results now. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so the results are 30-10 and Osborne wins. Congratulations. We now move on to the presentations. So our first presentation is by Vice President Tirone on the format of minutes. So take it away.
All right, thank you, everybody. And before I get started, I'd just like to thank our two candidates. I know it is a bit stressful to be here and going through the vote, and I appreciate that we had two excellent candidates. And thank you for standing for the executive committee. I'm going to keep this presentation short and to the point. We on the executive committee had been hearing from some of our subcommittees that it was difficult to find people to take minutes because there was sort of a general misunderstanding about what minutes are supposed to entail. And it was really taxing on our secretaries and our chairs to try and keep minutes, which they were trying to replicate essentially what would be a transcript of the proceedings. So in order to simplify the process and to make everyone's life a little bit easier, we have come together and put together what we think are some best practices for minutes based on Robert's rules and requirements under open meetings laws. We're seeking to incorporate that into the minutes of the Senate. As you may have seen today, we're adopting this new format, and we have voted to distribute this to our committees moving forward to recommend that they use this, although committees are going to have some discretion as we are going to see moving through. So what does Robert's Rules say about the content of minutes? They are basically a record of decisions. So they are not transcripts, and they are supposed to really include what is done, not what is said. They need to be informative, precise, and easy to read, and they should be written neutrally. So this is not an opportunity for the secretary to editorialize on someone's comments or on a motion or some action of the body, but simply this is a written record so that you can reference it back later to when was this decision made, what was the motion, and when did this piece of business occur. They can be dry and boring. In fact, it's probably a good sign if they are. Again, this is just a written record to memorialize what occurred at the meeting. In an ordinary society, the minutes should contain mainly a record of what was done at the meeting, not what was said by the members. The meeting must never reflect the secretary's opinion, favorable or otherwise, on anything said or done. And this is from section 48.2 of the 12th edition of Robert's Rules. What if more needs to be added to the minutes? In some cases, a body may feel that you want to go beyond sort of the bare bones. There's a couple options for this. You can adopt a standing rule for that committee in which you would say, we want to include these other pieces of information, and that can be done via motion. If you want to simply record additional information on a singular piece of business at that meeting, you can do that through an additional motion that the additional information be recorded in the minutes as well. If you think it's really important for future posterity to be able to look back and say, why was this decision made in this way? You can make a motion at that time in order to have that recorded in the minutes. Outside of that, again, it's really just a very basic document. The first paragraph should contain the kind of meeting, whether it's a regular or a special meeting, the name of the committee and the society, the date, time, and place, if the place is not always the same, whether the chair, president, and secretary were present. If not, write down the name of the alternates or substitutes, whether the minutes from the previous meeting were approved, and if the minutes were corrected, just state the minutes were approved as corrected. So if this comes out of a discussion that says we want to alter the prior minutes for the following reasons in order to make them more accurate with regards to what transpired, you don't need to go and encapsulate that entire debate. Just say the minutes were approved as amended and include that in the first paragraph, and that is sufficient. Every piece of business is supposed to be its own paragraph. So for every agenda item, for example, or every motion, that should be included as its own paragraph. And this should include, for example, all main motions made except for those that are withdrawn prior to being stated by the chair. Motion should state the wording and the way it was disposed. So what is the wording of what was proposed by the individual making the motion? And then what was the final disposition of that? Secondary motions, such as motions to recess, adjourn, suspend the rules, or others where needed for completeness. And in small committees, you can include the complete substance of oral committee reports. So that isn't something we would necessarily do here in the Senate, but if you had a smaller committee and you wanted to sort of have something that was closer to a transcript of a committee report, you can do that. In larger committees, the recommendation is that the committee report be submitted in writing. And that is how you get that into the minutes. You can include the report with the minutes if so desired. All notices of motion. So if there are motions that require future notification, you would include that in the minutes of the meeting. All points of order and appeals, and in the unlikely circumstance that the chair needs to reprimand someone using some of the available options under Robert's Rules, the name of the offending member and any words or actions which led to this. So liar, liar, things like that could possibly invite some intervention by the presiding officer. The last paragraph is supposed to include the signature and the time of adjournment. The minutes should always be signed by the secretary and also signed by the president chair if the committee desires to have this happen. You do not need to note the name of the seconder of a motion. Now, you can make a requirement if you so desire within your committee that this be done, but it is not a standing rule under parliamentary procedure. Informal questions, if you are considering a question informally, such as in a committee of the whole, the main motion still needs to be considered, but all the parliamentary procedure needs to go into the minutes, but the informal discussion or a summary of the informal discussion should not be included. If you have a guest speaker, provide the name and the subject only, no summary of the remarks made. If you wish to have a summary of the remarks, again, this is an area where you can include a motion at that time to include a summary narrative of the speaker's comments or ask them to submit a written report and include that with the minutes. So this is not to say that the guest presentations are not useful or there's not a way to include them, but it's standing practice. Generally, you're not supposed to editorialize or summarize what the guest presenters are saying. And if a committee report is of great importance, the body can move to include it in the minutes, and the secretary copies it in full or attaches a copy as previously stated. Once the draft is ready, distribute it to all the members with the notice of meeting. The draft must be clearly marked as such to avoid confusion with the approved minutes. Minutes are put for approval in the next regular meeting immediately after the call to order and opening ceremonies. When the minutes are approved, the word approved should be written on the minutes, again, to differentiate them from the draft version. If you make a mistake and somebody says, hey, 2 meetings ago, I noticed that we erroneously stated or recorded the motion that was made, you can go back and redo it, as you can do with any prior action of the body. This would just be a motion to amend something previously adopted. This requires a 2/3 vote or a majority vote with prior notice. So if you said, hey, in the October meeting, I wish to go back and amend the minutes from August because we have an error, that would simply be a majority vote. If you want to do it at that meeting, it requires a 2/3 vote of those present and voting to make that amendment. The content of the original minutes is not altered. You simply add an explanatory note correcting what was recorded erroneously in the original minutes. Is all this consistent with our friend open meetings laws? Yes, it is. Right. So open meetings laws is generally permissive of what we have proposed here. So revised statute 4220 states the minutes must contain the date, time, and place of the meeting, the members of the public body recorded as either present or absent, the substance of all matters decided. Again, those should be each in their own paragraph. And at the request of any member, a record by individual member of any votes taken. Please don't do this. Right. So there are certain things in which we're going to do roll call votes. Most of the voting that we're going to do is simply going to be by yay or nay. We take the yays, or usually the prevailing side, based on who signed in. The reason that we take the minority side on any issue, we record the names, is to have the vote. Generally, our practice in the Senate is that if you do not vote in the minority side and you don't indicate that you're abstaining, we are counting you for purposes of recording your vote as being on the prevailing side. In certain circumstances, you can make a request to have that updated. It's very cumbersome in this body, which is why we don't utilize that practice. In smaller bodies, if you think that it is important to have the individuals recorded as to which way they voted, you can make that request and that can be entered into the minutes. There are some motions that you can only go back and redo prior business if you are on the prevailing side. That could be one of the reasons in which you would want to record how individuals voted. But again, there are going to be some circumstances, there are limited circumstances in which that may be material to you. And the minutes should also include any other information that the public body requests be included or reflected in the minutes. And just to reiterate that the minutes are not necessarily supposed to be transcripts. In fact, it's recommended that they're not. There is Attorney General opinion number 11-0275, which states that minutes need not be verbatim transcripts and that summaries satisfy the requirement. So everything that we have presented to you today keep us in compliance with open meetings laws to the best of our knowledge and interpretation. So why do this? What are the benefits of this? Well, on September 11th, the FSEC approved to draft minutes using Robert's rules. This is some of the versions that you're now seeing, and provide this guidance to all our Senate committees with the hope that this not only brings uniformity between the minutes of the various committees, but also that it's going to help us run the committees more efficiently and effectively. Again, it should be less distracting for the secretary to not have to record the substance of the discussion that was occurring, but simply the parliamentary motions that were introduced that aided in the disposition of the matter. This should also facilitate greater participation. If there is some sensitive information that is being discussed and someone is comfortable offering the comment within the body but doesn't necessarily want to memorialize moving forward, right? This mitigates that problem. It also is more precise and accurate and reduces the likelihood that someone will be misquoted, the sentiment of what you had expressed is misrepresented, or something of that nature, right? So we think that this is largely beneficial. Again, we're not going to enforce this on committees. We recommend this as the standard practice moving forward. If you want to use this in your own committees and your own departments, right, we would recommend that as well. But this is simply something that we figured folks were going to notice that we're changing this for ourselves, and we're going to hopefully push this out to our committees. We wanted to make you cognizant of why we were making this change, what we think the benefits are, and present to you, sort of a quick overview of what the minutes should contain and how best to approach them. Are there any questions about a relatively dry and mundane subject? Yes.
As a chair.
Mm-hmm.
So I hit this a couple of times. We had a couple of meetings. We didn't get a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you all at that point was, okay, what do you do about minutes in that case?
Mm-hmm.
And you basically said, okay, you don't have to submit them. But we didn't, of course, take any votes or do any action, but we did obtain some pretty useful information. So how should that be handled?
So in the case where a meeting is convened in the absence of a quorum, basically the only things you can do once you convene the meeting, if you notice that a quorum is not present, is either immediately move to adjourn the meeting or move to put the meeting into recess and authorize the chair to go out and grab people and pull them into the meeting to make sure that you make quorum. If it doesn't look like you're going to make quorum, you have to adjourn the meeting. Anything that proceeds after that point is unofficial. If there's a presentation from, for example, an invited guest, that is not part of the meeting, because if you continue with the meeting in the absence of a quorum, that would be illegal. So at that point, the meeting essentially ends and the minutes end as soon as the motion to adjourn that is offered once you've noticed that the quorum is not present, and that terminates the official meeting. So there would.
And go ahead and talk to whoever we've invited to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk to them, so you know, there is a bit of a line here. What's that?
Like the provost, for example.
Yeah, usually it's a bad idea to invite the provost and then not listen to what he has to say. So, you know, if you want to invite the provost and have a meeting, what I would say is don't do anything that could be understood to sort of be a circumvention of open meetings laws, right? That, hey, we're calling a meeting. We know that we're going to, you know, decide some business here or make a decision that could be a substitute for later deliberation that would occur in a future meeting. So this is where we, you know, are encouraging our chairs to exercise your best judgment. Have the meeting with the provost, but don't make any decisions as the committee. Reserve those for the future meeting. And then if you want to reference back to that and communicate to the other members what had occurred, right? But don't do anything that, to the best of our knowledge, again, that would seem as a substitute for a debate that would occur at a later public meeting. So that way you can just sort of pass it in the meeting, but the substance of the deliberation occurred in the preceding meeting and the public was not privy to it. That is, you know, with all the appropriate, you know, sort of caveats, what we would recommend in that situation.
Okay, so one other real quick thing.
Yeah.
So at our last meeting for this semester,
Mhm.
I didn't have a secretary,
Mhm.
so I put together the minutes
Sure.
and sent it to you all. And you said, oh, they have to be approved.
Mhm.
Well, the committee's completely different, in fact, has not met because
Mhm.
we're short a couple of meetings. So what do I do about that? By approving it, you
Mhm.
mean the committee members? Can I email it out and say,
Yeah,
how does that work?
at the first meeting of the new committee, you can consider the minutes from the proceeding. Now, if new members are uncomfortable with voting on a meeting that they did not attend, they can certainly, I would encourage them to abstain at that point. So if they don't want to weigh in. But usually, right, given that the minutes should be considered at the next regular meeting of the body, that's what we would recommend. That's how that's the practice that we're utilizing on the executive committee at this point. No problem. Yes. Just the microphone, because I think it will facilitate with the recording. Yeah.
So what's the role of recording with regards to open meetings laws? So everything's being recorded right now,
Mhm.
right? And so how does that play into open meeting laws versus, say, minutes, which you've explained here? So can they discover all that, for example? So that is sort of a dialogue that's being recorded in, you know, verbatim,
Mhm.
right? So it kind of, is that something they could, say, look at if they wanted to, they being the public?
So, and Param, correct me if I am speaking here, and we can confirm this interpretation with the general counsel's office, and you raise a good point. As far as I am aware, under the requirements of open meetings laws, we are only required to post the minutes and not the recording. We post the recording as a convenience for the members of the body and for others who may wish to go back and view the meeting later on. The technical requirement is that we post the approved minutes for 3 months on the website after the meeting. So, I mean, obviously, if it's on YouTube, right, then, you know, it's going to be available. Now, our expectation, and I don't think there's any committee that's doing this, but our subcommittees are not recording their proceedings, right? So it's less of a concern there than it would be for the Senate. If the Senate wished to not record or to record and not post, I believe we would have the authority to do that. We don't have an option to take minutes and not post the minutes. That is the requirement. But if there was something that was particularly sensitive and the body wanted to make a motion and say, I don't think we should record this and post it on YouTube, I think that is something we would have the option to implement at that point in time.
Right. But I mean, are recordings somehow discoverable in a way that they wouldn't, because it's, you know, state business,
Mhm.
right, with open meetings laws?
Might
Might you be obligated to give people a recording if they ask for it?
I would want to check with the general counsel's
Right.
office because that is beyond my pay grade. There are certain things I'm willing to interpret, but you know, my guess is that if there's something you have any concern about, it's probably better to err on the side of caution, but we will certainly get the parameters of that from them.
I can just I'm recording this right now, so that like I can put in the minutes what was the size accurate code. Ken and I both serve on that IT committee. We're just posting for it because at that time we had secretary. But this only remains. You can store it.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions about anything that's presented here, we'd be happy to share the slides with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next presenter is Parampreet Singh, not as secretary, but as the head of our IT ad hoc Faculty Senate IT committee, to give you a quick update on what they've been up to.
Okay, so this is the progress report so far from the ad hoc FS IT committee. And before I continue, I would first like to express some thanks to Provost Haggerty, who is not here, to Jane Cassidy and Office of Academic Affairs, CCT for providing the space where this meeting is held very regularly, and obviously the Faculty Senate leadership for providing a lot of support in the back. So I'm just going to update you on what we have been up to and what were some of the major concerns. It's impossible to go in 10 minutes through all the concerns, so I've picked a few of them from various avenues and give you some more details. And if you have any questions, we can discuss. Okay, so what is the charge of this committee? The charge was to review and suggest policy changes to ITS and provide faculty perspective on these issues. And the goal which the committee has been following is, through this charge, is to work closely with ITS to help implement the state-of-the-art IT infrastructure and IT best practices at LSU, while keeping the education and research mission of LSU at the forefront. We want to bring those industry standards, but we don't want to forget that we are an academic R1 institution and the research and education comes first. Then to address the concerns of the academic community on the current and future revisions of various policies, and then help develop tools for LSU community, faculty, staff, and students to increase awareness on IT policies and all related matters. These are the membership. This is the membership of the committee. Like some of you are here: Scott Baldridge, Kerry Knapp, Ken Lopata, Joanna Moreno, Fabio Del Piero, Sam Robinson, Larry Smolinski, Sumit Jain, who's the Chief Information Security Officer, serves as an ex officio. Craig Woolley is the Chief Information Officer. I am the chair, and I was secretary prior to August 2023, and Gary has taken up the secretary role since August 2023. Past members, Fanny Ramirez and Jeff Rowland. So there are still some vacancies on this. If you're interested, I'm still looking for non-STEM faculty members to fill some of the roles. So if you're interested, you should please try to contact me. Okay, so let's look at what we are up to. So these are LSU's IT policies. These are 14 policies. And of these 14 policies, there are also 55 standards. These policies, why are we having these policies? Because PM 36 sets the requirements to have the policies. Also for the SACS reaccreditation, we needed all these policies. And the draft revisions to these existing policies have been going on by ITS since 2021. We haven't covered all the policies yet, and we are going to slowly, I'm going to tell you what policies we are at right now. So what has been the timeline so far? Chief Information Craig Woolley and Chief Information Security Officer Sumit Jain, they presented the updates on the draft IT policies to Faculty Senate Executive Committee on 12th April this year. In the same meeting, the FSEC approved the formation of an ad hoc IT committee to get the faculty input at large from various members of the faculty. On 14th of April, the draft policies were made available to the committee. This committee was, Inessa and Dan and I started contacting from the 12th April itself. The committee was quickly formed. Some of the members were already there. Before 14th of April, committee members had no information about the policies. On 26th of April, the first committee meeting was held in CCT, and it has held in CCT throughout. After that, 16 meetings were held in summer of 2023. So all of them averaging 2+ hours, some of them running marathon meetings more than 3 hours. And since the beginning of this semester, we are having weekly Wednesday morning meetings. So if you're interested, there is a meeting tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. in CCT. Policies covered till date, which includes like from April. So PS 120 on information security program and the 4 standards, PS 121 on acceptable use, PS 122 on IT risk management, PS 124 on data management, and PS 126 on encryption. Some of these policies were extremely technical. For example, PS 126 on encryption, on which I had zero idea. And I have to thank many unsung heroes of LSU who taught me, like in my office, what all that meant, and before like every meeting and so on. So I used to do a lot of homework along with some other committee members. There have been extensive revision to each policy and associated standards. Like if somebody wants a summary, like I can share that PDF file. And we received lots of comments from various faculty members, thanks to email Inessa sent in April to get the feedback. We got a lot of feedback by May 31st. Whatever was within the domain of these policies so far, we have covered all of those concerns one way or another. And I'll come to like what are still the areas which are not touched, just one area. So let me come to some of the main concerns which were raised prior in the policies which were reviewed so far. Some of the main things, like there was a lot of concern by various faculty members on what are the allowed softwares under these IT policies and whether they will restrict the research mission of LSU. There was also a lot of concern about whether we can even use our personal cell phones or even landlines to text or call our colleagues to talk about any university business. What about if you accidentally have a non-compliance? You do not fully understand the policy, and suppose you broke the policy, like will there be some disciplinary action or the PS 104 invoked or something like that? How do you get the exceptions to the policies? Like suppose like you are running an experiment and that experiment requires a particular router which has to communicate with some space balloon or something. Like how do you find that exception for that? And how do you classify the data? Like the data classification was done in the confidential way, private way, and the public way. And many of us deal with the data which does not fall with any of these categories. So there were these are just some of the concerns. There were various concerns at that time. But the committee worked extremely hard, with which I mean like both people from ITS, Craig Bullion, Sumit Jain, and we addressed all of them. So let me come to the allowed softwares. The earlier concern was there are limited number of softwares allowed under these policies. Any other software needs a IT 100 form, which means like we are talking about tens of thousands of IT 100 requests being sent throughout the university. And the way we were able to change was that now PS 121 standard 3 allows a much larger set, including legally obtained, and I'm putting a star that legally obtained, ethically obtained, and you are complying with all the terms and conditions. So I cannot write them here. There are a lot of them, but think like you are doing something legal, not illegal. So which includes all freeware, which is at the enterprise level allowed, where the data is not stolen from LSU, data is still owned by LSU. Similarly, open source software in non-instructional settings. And there are, please don't just look at these 3 lines and start following these 3 lines. There are lots of details in PS 121 standard 3. Please go to that standard and read what are the terms and conditions there. And various codes and libraries, like a lot of codes and libraries which are in the freeware. I'm just giving the bullet points here, like what was allowed. And then this all, whatever we used to discuss, it went to all those concerned parties back, whosoever asked the questions. Once we had their approval, then the committee said, okay, now we go ahead, everyone is fine. So most of the times we were finding a middle ground one way or another. There were concerns by ITS, there were concerns by faculty, and the task of the committee was, let's find what we can agree on without compromising any of the security issues in LSU. Similarly, like the personal phones for LSU business, there was earlier concern the way policies were being read, that the users cannot text or talk on personal phones for any university business, and only university provided digital communication services can be used. So there was a lot of back and forth on that. And now, so what happened was that we have changed, or we modified the definition of digital communication service to exclude cellular, landline, or VoIP providers. So the phones were allowed. So if we could not do in a particular way, we managed to do in another way. Okay, similarly, accidental non-compliance. And our concern was students in particular, like undergrad students and grad students. If they have not understood the policies, they can be non-compliant pretty easily. And earlier the language was quite strict, and now it only states that the network access will be blocked and the assets will be blocked, but the situation will be resolved in collaboration with that user. On the same thing, like committee discussed a lot, and all members of the committee, including those from including Sumit and Craig, especially them, they were very enthusiastic and encouraged that if LSU really wants a better policy compliance, LSU should be thinking of providing IT assets to everyone, including grad students, from the central funds. This should not come on the departments. This should be sponsored by the central funds to give these devices to everyone if we want 100% or near 100% compliance. Okay, exceptions. This was a big concern, and the concerns were, will exceptions be allowed? What is the procedure? How does a user appeal if an exception is denied? There was no provision of exception earlier in the policies, but now things have changed in these policies. Like PS 120 now states how an exception process is going to work. And ITS has promised to work collaboratively whenever the exception is needed on case-by-case basis. And if suppose exception cannot be given, then ITS will explain why the exception cannot be given and what are the alternates for that procedure. In case the exception request is denied, the submitter of the request can appeal the decision to a panel of the chairs or the designees of the chairs of the department IT subcommittee. This is part of ITGC, IT Governance Council, Research Technology Subcommittee, again part of IT Governance Council, and this ad hoc faculty Senate IT committee. So the 3 chairs from this committee will have that power to look at that request which will come of the denial of exception, and then they will work with ITS and resolve the situation. Data classification has been a big concern, the way data was classified. For example, I'm just giving like 2 examples. Like I do a small calculation in my office. How do I classify that? Is that and the earlier it was treated as a private data. Now somebody may say, well, why does it matter? Because if it's private data, then I have to lock it in some particular way, protect it, and nobody else can see it, and so on and so on. So, and it was treated as almost as a confidential data. So it just raises red flags everywhere. 89 numbers are treated as confidential data, were treated as confidential data in those policies. So the committee recommended major changes, and the data classification table which was there was removed. Now it just only says the definition and so on. There was a introduction of discretionary data instead of the public data, which includes low level of sensitivity data or public data. And the classification of this data will be determined by the data functional owner. So if you're writing some essay, or you're writing some paper, or you're doing some calculations or writing a code, you are the data functional owner. You decide whether it's a discretionary data. Discretionary data will not mean it's a public data if you don't want to show it to public, or it's a confidential data or a private data. You determine the security risk, and then you decide how you go forward. We were not able to settle the issue of 89 numbers. We went through the FERPA policy in detail. What does FERPA recommend? And FERPA recommends a particular guidelines for the 89 numbers, and they also have exceptions for when to treat it as a public data or a confidential data. So the resolution we found was not to put it anywhere at this stage. So this is not a solution, but at this stage, no one will be violating the policy 124 if you are not well, you have to be careful with the 8-9 numbers, but 8-9 numbers are not in the policy now, PS 124. This needs to be worked with the registrar's office. This was communicated to Provost Haggerty, and he again recommended we have to work with the registrar's office. So this is a ongoing issue. All members of the committee believe that we have to be following what FERPA says and not just arbitrarily putting 8-9 numbers as confidential data. Okay, so going forward, ITGC in the summer, in the beginning of summer, passed a resolution acknowledging the role of the ad hoc FSIT committee in the entire review process. And this is now codified in PS 120. So any changes to IT policies will pass through the ad hoc FSIT committee, and only then it will go to ITGC. Right now, in collaboration with our feedback, ITS is developing Grok articles and videos on policies. Those videos will be released once we cover all the policies. And summary sheet from academic perspective is being developed. Ken Lopata is in charge on that with Craig Woolley. He'll be preparing a summary sheet. And I have to really say that the faculty and ITSM committee have developed a very healthy and a very hardworking relationship. And I expect that this relationship will continue beyond these policies. So for any concerns or suggestions which you have on IT policies, they are online now. So everyone is supposed to follow them, but we have to remember like which policies we have covered so far. But so some policies are still remaining. Out of 14, we have covered 5 till this date, and 6th is in progress. You can still write to facultysenate@lsu.edu with the subject FSIT, and that will eventually come to Tricia, and she will forward to me. She forwards me to in bi-weekly basis. Yes, Wayne.
Estimate for us the amount of time that the state faculty members read all of this policy.
I think that's a loaded question. Not only I started reading some of those policies and I realized I'm not expert at, for example, encryption, right? Like there are terms which were used, and just to reading is not enough, but to understand many of those things, some of those policies don't even apply to all LSU users. Like they are very technical in nature. So sometimes we felt that whether there should be really a policy like that, or whether it should be a technical standard or something. Unfortunately, due to various compliance things with external agencies, ITS has to do the way they are doing. That is what we have understood now. It takes a lot of effort. I agree. Like I can say like easily, like just to read, like you need probably 40 hours of work just to read. Yes. We can take that viewpoint. So I don't want to express my personal viewpoint because I'm chair of this committee. So I'm taking a neutral stance here. So if you have to also think from the ITS perspective, the various we also have to think about the way our nation is passing through various cybersecurity challenges, and how LSU is being judged by various agencies which ensure a lot of our security apparatus. Once we take those things into account, I think like what my understanding is, and please Ken or Jeff or Scott correct me, my understanding is that we have to strike a balance. And what we are doing in this revision process is striking that balance between industry standards and being an academic institution. Yes, some of these policies are quite technical, but I don't think like there is really a solution. Like we can go through the policies. We went through the policies of various other universities, and yes, some of them were less technical. But given the environment we are living in, where the security is really challenged, probably like doing more is better.
But left to its own devices, bureaucratic apparatus will increase the amount of time, the effort the faculty have to put into fine. And in my impression, it's already expanding pretty rapidly. And it's gotten to the point where it's the primary mission of practice.
I agree with you. I think it will be a great idea if you can send those comments in an email, this email, and this will be shared in the committee. But Ken and Scott and Jeff, like if you want to add something to Wayne's remark, like Scott.
I could briefly say, we're trying to distill it down to absolutely what you need to do to apply it. Is there one page that this is what you really need to apply for? It's not the best, but it will make it less than a burden on everyone. We're trying that hard. There are some gotchas I might mention. So as a caveat to the software section, just so everyone, I do that. Yeah. Sorry.
I guess as an example of the complexity, all software used for instruction needs to be approved, just so you know. If you use software in a way that the students interact with it, regardless of its license, regardless of legality or illegality, it needs to be approved due to accessibility. And so there's like tricky stuff. But anyways, we're trying to make a list of all the things you need to know to make it easier. Yeah, so you need to get it routed through IT. When you need to fill out a form online that says this is the software, this is what it's used for. It goes to IT, they say it's good or not, and then it goes to accessibility and they say, does it generate an output that's properly accessible?
Yes.
I guess my comment was based on an experience I had this summer trying to just buy a very common research related software. And it's almost like you have to make an ad hoc acquisition request in order to purchase that. It seemed like an unreasonable and insensitive burden put on the faculty member that did, in fact, delay our research, make it harder for us to get that software into the names of it. And so it materially harmed our research. It's a very common software. It's called In Vivo, just maybe not the world's best software. And but there's no reason where a sensitive IT department would be putting that burden on the faculty beforehand. But of course, I think it's easier administratively for the administration not to internalize those efforts. And so I guess I do have those concerns about the rollout of these. Are they really thinking about our core mission in terms of how they interpret what the standards are?
Sure.
Because if they're in control of interpreting what the standards are, that will be determinative kind of the final action.
So is this a freeware? Is this a free software or you have to
It's a
purchase?
commercial software,
It's a commercial software.
but
So-
used for research and that.
but we don't have an enterprise license for that, right? It's a,
I don't think so.
okay. So what is the name of the software?
In Vivo, but the point is, I think that should be kind of irrelevant.
Yes. So I think at some point, the department representatives of the department ID subcommittee, they contacted the faculty members, or they were supposed to contact, or if not, like I am making that appeal. Anyone like who wants to send a list of softwares which should be approved, you can send that list. And Sumit is going to fill the IT 100 form for everyone. He has promised that. So you don't have to do that next year or something. But if it is commercially purchased, you anyway have to go through the IT 100 process because somebody has to pay for it. If it's a free software, which is not commercially purchased, you still have to go through IT 100 process if it's not in the list.
So would that include downloading a package for R?
No, that is why codes and libraries, we had that same issue. Earlier, your criticism was what would have been completely correct, that codes and libraries were not included. Downloading a package for R was not included. Now, most of the things are included. Millions of things are now automatically included. But if you still find something which is not included in the list in the PS 121 ST3, send a note. It will be included in IT 100. It will be filled for LSU automatically. Yes, there were some questions. Ingmar?
It was some structural setting because for closing. Thank you. It was basically about instructional settings, and I use Python, for example. So Python is part of some operating systems, and still it's something that's not necessarily included always. So is that something that we need to get approval for?
No, Python is already approved. Like when you will look at the list. For the instructional setting, you only have to make sure that the disability services there is no issue with that accessibility and the disability part in the group where you are teaching that instructional thing. But I think, like, again, if any of such issue arises, just send an email and we will look into it. Yes.
It maybe the situation came out of my own ignorance, but wasn't able to find that list, and I've clicked on PS 121-ST-3 on the website, and I don't have I'm not authorized to see it. So where?
No, there is no list because these will be probably in tens of thousands of names. We requested that list, but eventually, like, ITS didn't wrote that list. But you have those paragraphs where it clearly states which freeware, which open source software. So whatever you are downloading, if it fits that, you're fine. So if you will go to ST standard 3, PS 121 standard.
So for
3,
purchased software, is that?
For the purchase software, you have to go through IT 100. There is even for so whenever you purchase a software, there is a software acquisition process. And in that process, you will need IT 100 to be filled.
I guess my question, if there are software that will be predictably used in research, why put the burden on faculty to go through that process to buy in vivo over and over again?
So you're saying, like, IT 100 process should not be in the software acquisition process at that time. So I think you can send this suggestion and the committee, look, the committee can only recommend that change, but it's eventually to ITS and eventually to HR and the admin who will decide this matter. You can mention it.
I can try to address that. I'll give you a little bit of history very briefly. Apparently, there were people who were using software against the way it should be used. So basically, they're breaking a license or downloading freeware and using it, maybe deploying it on many computers. And then the companies came after LSU saying, you guys are using freeware in an enterprise setting and we're going to sue you for a ton of money.
Yeah.
And so the university got really scared of people doing that. And so that's why a lot of these rules were born. But the committee, we tried to push really hard to say the user who downloads the code, they're responsible for doing it legally, right? So now you still have the responsibility. That's why you have these carve outs for freeware.
Yeah.
Therefore, and for research use, you don't need permission. Open source, you don't need permission. Codes and libraries, you don't need permission. And so you're still now responsible. So we tried really hard to make it not so burdensome, and that took a lot of fighting. And
so
I might say briefly though, when it comes to acquisition, if you pay, it's got to go through the system. There's no debating that, right? We couldn't get that. So if it comes out of a grant, you have to do an acquisition process, and part of that will go through IT. But if they've seen it before, they're just going to approve it, right? So it shouldn't be any more burdensome than actually doing the process to pay for the code itself, right?
So I just want to add to what Ken said, that this particular thing, we spent almost like 3 or 4 meetings just to address the concerns and get everything done. And again, like, we used to propose something and ITS will go to general counsel or to HR and admin and bring the feedback back. And then we strike some sort of a balance. But I agree, like, it's not a perfect solution. Like, it's some middle ground, much more than what we thought we will achieve. But whatever concerns any faculty member has or your department has, send an email. That is really very, very important for us to have that data. Scott.
So Scott Baldridge in math. I'll say that in regards to this, we also had people that do these acquisitions a lot. Like they're the ones that are constantly filling out IT 100s as part of their job, and they were a lot of those people actually helped us in crafting this language. So they knew, oh, look, we don't have to. There should be no reason why you have to fill out this form for a piece of open source software, and so they helped us craft that Can we go to page 9? I think it is. I just want to stress that this was a really important. This right here is a really important new wording, and because the committee was always looking at things like can you know, is IT now going to be used or be abusive in kind of being part of disciplinary actions and and putting you up into, you know, some big piece of PS nightmare disciplinary type things. And if you look at what happens now, and by the way, ITS doesn't want that. ITS just wants to protect the network. So if you read this now, it says non-compliance with any IT security policies and standards results in blocking. So no longer, you know, are we going to confiscate your telephone, and, you know, that language was kind of there before, and it felt like it was really oppressive. Now it just says, oh, you do something wrong, your laptop no longer has access. And that's the extent of that, what they want. That's all that really ITS wanted, was just to say, if your laptop is causing problems on our internet, we have the right to block you. And if you read it further, it says blocking the network access and or users until the identified issue has been resolved in collaboration with the appropriate support personnel. So now they'll come to you and talk to you and say, well, we still want you to be on the network, but you have this virus that's on your laptop. Can we get the virus removed? That's it. It's no longer, well, this is going to go up to some, you know, disciplinary committee, and you might be reprimanded and anything like that. So this was a major statement, and I think that it's one of the things I'm actually very proud of.
Thank you, Scott. There was one last question. Yes, you had behind first, sir. You were raising hand earlier. Yeah.
It's more a question about software donated. We get a lot of software donated, and we have to go through this very lengthy process every year to get new licenses, and these softwares are extremely expensive. But I was just wondering, like, how much complication we're gonna get it. But I can send an email to the, as you said, to the committee and just raise that question. Don't forget to include donated software in that process.
Okay, thank you.
There's also, I should remind that there's APIC website. I think the link was broken, and it seems to be working now. So I don't know, but yeah, but that's you can provide, you know, you can submit any complaints and it will be addressed. There are real people behind it. So maybe when you email Param or Faculty Senate, I would strongly advise you to email also APIC to just fill out the form, because those are addressed and they meet regularly. They will be meeting regularly. Yeah. Yeah, and APIC stands for Administrative Process Improvement Committee. And yeah, so it works. So please do share it with your colleagues. And I'm happy, but we can send it in an email to everyone to use.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And
Yeah.
if someone is interested in joining this committee, especially from non-STEM areas, send me an email.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Before I introduce our guests, I just want to thank Param and his just heroes of faculty members who are doing this colossal work. I mean, they're doing an unbelievable job, and I just want to give them one more round of applause, really. Our next presenter is Steve Beck from ORED, and he will be talking about new state and federal regulations about security and research security. Yeah, no other kind of security, research security and the like. So Steve, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
I'm a sound guy and I ought to be able to do this. Here we go. Okay, can you hear me? Great. Well, as a member of the administrative burden creating complex, I'm happy to be here to provide some new information for you about things that are coming up to us from both federal and state agencies that you should know about, and you should know about it in both a positive and in a concerned way. Positive in that things that we have already in place that are already working, and things that you should be concerned about, and some of the things that we're going to be trying to do to address them. So we're going to cover research security, specifically NSPM 33, CHIPS Act, Higher Education Foreign Security Act. It's a jumble, but I'll make sense of it, or at least I'll try. Research security is not something new. It's something that's actually been around for quite a while. Back in June of 2015, NIST issued their document 800-171, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but it's really the first document that tries to address protecting intellectual property and protecting unclassified but controlled information in venues outside of federal agencies. And so this was really the first attempt by the federal government to say, hey, we have some information, it's kind of sensitive, we don't want it falling into the wrong hands. Here's how universities and other research centers can do a better job of managing it. There are a few things like during the Trump administration, the DOJ China initiative started in 2018, DOE memo on foreign talent programs, Dear Colleague letters. And in January of 2021, right at the end of the Trump administration, NSPM 33 was issued, National Security Presidential Memorandum number 33, which lays out some goals and guidelines for research security, broadly speaking. It was then revised by the Biden administration in August of that year. It made it less focused on countries and more about activity and engagements. There were some various iterations of implementation guidance going on all throughout 2022. In July of 2022, the state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, decided to get in on the act and decided to lay down some rules for us to abide by with regard to research security. In January of this year, NSF released a new PAPG, which has updates on counterintelligence, and it provides a security toolkit and kind of lays the ground for March 2023, when the preliminary research security program standard requirements were delivered by OSTP, Office of Science and Technology at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. I'm not going to go through all of that all over again. So what is foreign influence? This is really the main concern, is how can we protect US intellectual property from going to malign actors in foreign countries, especially adversaries. The US pays for much of our research. The US has a vested interest in protecting that research. The benefits of that research come to the university. The university protects it on behalf of the faculty and on behalf of itself. We need better ways of protecting the research from malign acquisition. Other areas of influence that are of concern: appointments and affiliations that duplicate federal funding or initiatives, such as foreign talent programs, that are not disclosed. And this is an important concept, that they are not disclosed. If they're disclosed, yeah, it's okay. But not disclosed is where the problems come in. And then finally, violations of confidential peer review processes for both manuscripts and grant proposals. And this is where if you're in a grant, in a peer review process and you decide, oh, that's a really good idea that somebody put in their paper, I'm going to start to use it right now. Well, actually, that's not ethical and that's not right. You have to wait until it gets published so you can cite it, so you can provide the proper context to the people who actually developed the work. So there's some guiding legislation. On the federal level, it's NIST 800, NSPM 33, and the CHIPS and Science Act, which was passed last year by the federal government. And then at the state level, the Higher Education Foreign Security Act, or HEFSA, as we like to call it. No, we don't like to. The purpose of research security really is to strengthen protections of US government supported R&D against foreign interference and exploitation. The priorities that we're looking at are enhancing the awareness of research security risks, to strengthen disclosure requirements and processes so that they minimize the amount of impact on faculty while still providing the appropriate amount of disclosure for their protection or our protection, and to strengthen risk assessments on foreign engagements and collaborations. There are some, at the federal level, there's some real benefits to NSPM 33, especially that there is now a standardization of common disclosure across agencies, or we are working towards getting that. The whole effort to get our CVs into Science CV for any federal proposal, that is an effort to actually streamline and make it easier for you, maybe not at the outset because you got to get it into Science CV, but once it's there, to be able to direct the proper elements of your CV to the agencies that need it for your proposals, whether you're proposing to NSF or NIH or DOE or DOD or whomever. Unique personal identifiers such as ORCID are part of that effort to disambiguate faculty from one another. There are a lot of Stephen Becks out in the world. Apparently, I'm involved in biomedical research, working with animals and especially in kidneys. That's not me. And then updating our ability to monitor current and pending. This is one area where there's going to be probably a negative impact in that your current and pending disclosures will need to be updated annually with any federal agency with whom you have a grant. Even once you get the grant, there needs to be some kind of updated process to that. We're trying to figure out ways to make that, to minimize the impact on that, to leverage Go grants into making that a little easier, but we've got some work to do on that. On the campus side, there are 4 elements that we really need to be focusing on: cybersecurity and cybersecurity training, foreign travel, export control, and research security. The good news is that in those areas, and I'll talk more about it a little later on, we actually are ahead of the game, or we actually have things in place already that handle this. But they don't necessarily talk to one another. I know you're terribly surprised that units of the university don't talk to one another, but it's true. The CHIPS and Science Act actually adds a few things. So first, on the CHIPS side, the manufacturing side, there's historic investments in science and technology innovation, especially in the translation of semiconductor research into production. This is a huge investment and really meant to try to leverage the US back into a leadership position in chip manufacturing. But there's some research security training that's part of this process that needs to be included. It extends requirements for research security training to all covered individuals for federal science and engineering programs. And that includes RCR, making sure that you have taken courses in responsible conduct of research, research security, export control, cybersecurity training. That those things are things that we're going to have to develop a program for, so that you have the latest information on how to best protect the work that you're doing. And it also defines foreign countries of concern, as well as foreign talent programs in very specific ways, so that we have a better understanding. We at the university have a better understanding of what it is that they mean by that. NIST is, as I said before, protecting controlled unclassified information in non-federal organizations. This is something that's been in place for a while. It was revised in February 2020. The bad news is that LSU is not compliant. The good news is there is no university in the world that can be fully compliant with NIST 800, because it would mean disconnecting the university from the network, from the global networks. It's not possible. But what we do have is we have a process by which we can identify spaces on campus or off campus where controlled unclassified information research can happen, and happen in a way that meets the standards in NIST 800-171. The Louisiana Education Foreign Security Act. So this is not my favorite piece of legislation ever, but it is the law, and it's what we have to deal with. There are three components of the law that are critical. One is foreign gift reporting. The Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, requires the university to disclose any accumulation of contributions to the university from a foreign government over $250,000 in a year. So if a particular country invested $250,000 in student scholarships for students from that country, we would have to report that. But if it was 250,000, but 50,000 was from one country, 50,000 was from another country, 50,000 was from, you got the idea, we don't have to report that. We already do this. This has been the law for how many years? I mean, Jane, do you remember how long? It's been a while. The state decided, hey, we should do that, but we're going to lower the threshold to $50,000. Okay, there we go. I'm going to jump to foreign travel and approval because it's easier. Pre-approval of foreign travel on university business. This is part of the legislation, but it's something that's already, if not fully baked into what we do, mostly baked into what we do. Maintaining records and annual reporting of all travel to foreign adversaries as defined in the legislation. So it's a lot of record keeping, a little extra record keeping, and a little extra process in over at the travel office. And then screening of foreign researchers. This is the part that keeps me up, not as much, but it used to be, it kept me up at night. There's an extra security review that's now required for anyone who is hired into a research-oriented or research-related job. And that includes faculty, staff, and graduate students. And this has to be done prior to an offer being made. Yeah, thank you. And it applies to anyone who is not a US citizen of one of the countries of concern, a US citizen who has an affiliation with a program in one of those countries, or someone who's had more than 1 year of training in one of those countries. Now, what does this actually mean? What it means is that people have to submit a more extensive CV if they fall into this classification. If they are about to get hired, we review that and we do a risk analysis to find out whether or not there is what the level of risk is with regard to research security. And our approach will be that anybody who falls into a higher risk than normal we simply work with that person to make sure that they're fully disclosed of all of their foreign interests and their foreign engagements. So if they have a connection, we want to know about it. If they had a job somewhere, we want to know about it. And that's it. We want to make sure that by providing the proper disclosures, you're complying with the law. And as long as it's the same, it's no different than financial conflicts of interest. I'm kind of jumping ahead on a slide, but I'll get to it right now anyway. Financial conflicts of interest are things that we monitor because they're bad for research if you let the financial interest govern the research. But we want financial conflicts of interest because we want you to take your research and turn it into an enterprise, to turn it into economic benefit for you, for the city, for the state, for the country. We want that. That's part of our job. And so we have an infrastructure to facilitate that and to identify how we can separate the financial interest from your research so that there's no conflict. The same is true for international engagements. We want international engagements. We have to have international engagements. It's at our core. So now we simply have to have a way to manage those international connections so that the international connections don't affect the research or don't adversely engage in the research. If that makes sense. So what we're looking at right now is how we improve disclosure processes. We're currently revising the FCOI and PM11 disclosures that are in Go grants so that they are more manageable, and that they talk to one another. Right now, if you disclose a outside employment in PM11, you have to, if it's significant, you have to disclose it again as an SFI, as a significant financial interest. We're getting rid of that, so you only have to disclose it once. So if you disclose the PM11, it automatically moves over into the significant financial interest. We need to do work on identifying and disclosure, or finding a process to help the disclosure of foreign talent programs and gifts. We're working with ITS on, and some of the policies that you saw that Param was talking about. Those in many cases are being put in place because of the expectations of what is coming down from the federal government with regard to research security. So this is all part of the larger picture. And then as far as infrastructure, we want to make sure that we have all of the pieces in place to make sure that we're coordinating disclosures properly, we're reporting them properly, and that we're making sure that you can do the research that you need to do without having to worry about the issues regarding research security. Agencies really now are moving away from this notion of countries of concern. The state legislation now is foreign adversaries, and the foreign adversaries are China, Cuba, North Korea, Russia, and Iran, and Nicholas Moderna. He's listed in the list. That's the federal list. Nope. There are 6 foreign adversaries. Repeat after me: China, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, Russia, Nicholas Moderna. Right? Okay. And so what we're really concerned about is more conflicts of interest, conflicts of commitment, and behavior that would indicate that you are involved some way, or that people around you are involved in some way that threatens the research integrity of your work. Okay? And the approach that we want to take is compliance through disclosure. Now, is this an increased burden on you as an individual? Maybe. Is it necessary? Unfortunately. Is there anything that I can do to make it easier? We're working on it. Okay? But disclosure, making sure that we have proper processes for disclosure, and that those processes are as streamlined and as straightforward as possible is really important to us. This is the kind of the timeline of implementation. January was the first implementation guidance. We were able to provide, and we provided to the federal government our response to some of these initial regulations, essentially saying, you gotta help us out here. That's essentially our response. There's too much. We've got to find ways to make this better. The federal government is supposed to provide by October, well, the 120-day period for review ends on October 3rd. So October 3rd, we should receive a final, either a response to our responses or some finalized version of the guidance. I'm taking even odds that that doesn't happen. Number one, it's the federal government. Number two, it's the federal government. But assuming that it does meet those deadlines, by the end of January, we have to have published kind of a basic outline of what our policies and programs are going to be to address research security. And we have to do it in a public, it'll be on the ORED website at some point. And by a year from the date, October 3rd, we will need to certify with the federal government that we have actually implemented this. So it's not a very long program, but generally speaking, I think we're in pretty good shape. The HEFSA, we're doing it. And on the federal side with NSPM 33, we have the pieces parts for most of this. The part of this, NIH and NSF are actually developing online training programs for research security, cybersecurity, that we can leverage so that our office doesn't have to reinvent it, and that we can set policies as to when and how often faculty need to be certified in these areas. So I think we're actually in a pretty good place as far as that goes. We are undergoing a research security planning process. We're trying to secure an outside program assessment to help us identify areas of weakness that we need to address. We're building a coordinating committee, and you still owe me a faculty member. And then we'll be implementing recommendations on what changes need to happen in terms of policies and procedures, both within ORED, within the university, and the LSU entity as a whole. All of the campuses are actually looking at LSU A&M to provide the leadership and guidance for their campuses, because as it stands on the federal side, LSU is the only campus that meets the requirement we have more than $50 million in federal research. So we have to meet these standards. Health science centers don't, PBRC doesn't, Ag Center doesn't. They will want to, not will, they do want to, because they want to reach those thresholds as well. So they need to be able to have this in place. But we're providing the guidance for those campuses. And with that, I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Ed.
So I have a question about the state regulation.
Yeah.
Before I do that, though, I wanted to thank you and kind of a shout out for the hard work you guys do for Science Cafe.
Oh, thank you.
It's wonderful.
And we have just to throw that in. So thank you. Next Tuesday at 5 o'clock at the Varsity Science Cafe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question was about the the RS 1826. I'm on a hiring committee this year, and one of our applicants was, I think, offended and upset at the wording of the letter. And I'm not talking about the federal government, but the state. The wording he got, and this is one of our applicants, is, you're identified as an individual associated with a foreign adversary of the United States. As such, you must fill out the following. That's a very, very hostile language. I'm not blaming you for it. But I know we can't change state law here. That's beyond our pay scale at the moment. Can we manage the wording in some way to make this less, to say something along the line of, due to RS 1826, we require, thank you for applying to LSU, due to RS 1826, we require additional information for your particular application, and then just list it. But the foreign adversary language, and you're a citizen of that, you're a spy, whatever it is, it's harsh language. And because we're in this competitive environment, this applicant was quite offended. We probably lost the applicant.
Yeah.
Wonder if maybe there's something we can do about that.
Well, I will certainly raise it with HR, with Nikki Norton. I've been working with Nikki Norton on this, and I can certainly raise the concern about it. I know that there are real limitations as to what we can and cannot say. No, I'm
crosswise with our language on tolerance and the ability to treat everybody of all nationalities equally and respectfully. So it's discord. Maybe it's the language change.
The discord is part of what keeps me up at night. And it's really hard. We have to meet the letter of the law. We have to meet it. We can try to make it as palatable as possible. But there's a real intent. Well, is anybody recording this? I guess you are. Yeah. Yes. Okay. We have to meet the letter of the law, and I'll talk with Nikki to see if there is what leeway there is within the law for that communication. But it is a challenge, and we are all aware. We are all fully aware of the challenge that this presents.
Thank you. I had a question about export control. Is there anything at LSU that helps us with, say, working with classified data, or or the opposite way, like a sort of company shares data with us? It's basically mask data, and they're asking us to make it public so they also don't get into trouble. So is there sort of like a mechanism in place for us to work with LSU to make that data public, or vice versa? They want to share data that is confidential and they want us to keep it confidential and just work on it, because again, I've been in both situations, and the first case where we had to keep the data confidential, there was no really, like, I talked with IT head Summit, and again, there were so many back and forths that we lost the interest of that company. They just said, like, it looks like there's nothing in place. And now there's another project that they have shared data and we have to make it public.
Right.
So is there anything?
Sure. So actually, in our office, we do process data use agreements. We do it quite frequently. A lot of times it's with the agreements are between state agencies or federal agencies and researchers, because there are certain requirements for it, but often it's also with private companies. So I think contact me and we'll try to get something, we'll get something together for you to so that we can work something out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, David, thanks for the presentation. I have
Sure.
a quick question also regarding this 26.3, the screening. So for example, if we have international students in the new semesters or in the next few years, so for this extra security review, who is going to review the international students' background and how will that be implemented? Thank you.
Sure. So the way in which we're handling it is the unit that, there are two units that are really at play here. The first one is HR, and this is for people who are hired either as faculty or staff. And they actually have a process by which they review the application, and they use a platform that we call or that is called visual compliance. And visual compliance is a tool that we use to identify individuals, companies, and countries that that are under some kind of sanction from the federal government. And it's sanctions come from left and right. I mean, it's a huge database that's aggregated from lots of little databases, and the company provides this for us. We can do a quick check, put their name in, put the company name in, put the country in, and we get feedback immediately as to whether or not any of those individuals or entities have sanctions against them. And we use that actually as a way of really understanding the nature of who the person is, what the company is, or where the country is, and we can make an assessment there in that way. With regard to graduate students, the way graduate students are handled is honestly very decentralized. And it would be impossible for us to have the same kinds of processes happen at the departmental level, or even in the graduate school, before graduate assistantships go out. It's just not possible. The approach that we are taking is that any student who is coming to the country to study needs to have a visa. And the visa process is one that really is far more arduous and far more in-depth than anything that we could do as an institution, because the visa process includes reviews from all the various federal security agencies taking a look at that. And so if our thinking is that, and the way that we're interpreting the law is that if a graduate student has a visa, they've been approved to come to this country, that provides enough security from our perspective that they're okay that they're a low risk to research security simply by having the visa, because they have gone through a process that's far more intrusive than anything that we could do. Sure. Or she has the mic. Okay. Whoever has the mic, speak up.
Will there be any changes to the IRB or data security form that we will sign with that?
So IRB actually no, this actually isn't surprising. IRB really isn't directly connected into that. I mean, IRB really is simply focused on human subject research, and it's pretty self-contained in terms of that. And in terms of who needs to have training, nothing in that is changing with regard to IRB.
And if like I start a project last year and I have a grad assistant who's maybe an international student,
right,
and that student graduates, and then I get another one, there never has been any question that I'm aware of about that person being able to handle the data.
Right. So again, there shouldn't be any issue there at all, because if they're if they're here as a grad student, they have a visa, from our perspective, they're at a low risk. There's a low risk. And if they don't have a visa and they haven't been able to get a visa, well, there's probably a really good reason why they didn't. And so we won't let them in here, even though the federal government won't let them in here either. So there.
Maybe two last ones, Ingmar and Carmela. Yeah, please wait for the mic. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. And this is a follow-up for what you said about international students. What happens is the international student is coming from, let's say, University of Florida to LSU. He came with a visa 2 years ago, but now he's transferring.
Yeah. So if they have come straight from another institution, again, their visa status really doesn't change. And we don't see it as a significant risk. It's still an insignificant risk. We're really not worried about that. If they were to go to their home country, work for different companies or whatever, we would want to know about that. So when they if they came back, so that would be.
Thank you.
Does that help? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you also for the clarifications. But just because I think I remember something about seeing that before the offer letter is being made, some things has to be checked. So that just to verify that this is not the case, we really can't just go by, okay, there's nothing required until they actually try to actually get a visa, and this is it.
Well, so the visa, I am not an expert on the graduate visa process. I probably should be, but I'm not. But I have good friends down there, and what they tell me is that yes, you can make an offer, but no offer is official, fully official, until they have a visa in hand.
Okay, that actually clarifies the question because
because they wouldn't be able to work. So I mean that there's and this is something we're trying to work with the state legislature to provide a little bit more clarity on that, so that we have kind of in the legislation kind of really specified requirements that we can, where we can do this kind of navigation. They clearly did not know how graduate students come to the university. They had no idea. And that's demonstrated by what they've asked for of us for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Very last question.
So Steve, like continuing on the like graduate student visas, many times the faculty members which they intend to join have to write letters to the consulates. I've done that in the past. So what is the guidance for the faculty here? Like, will we be in conflict with this law? Like, we cannot send any additional letters to the consulate, like explaining what kind of research that student is supposed to do?
There's nothing there's nothing that I have seen in any of the legislation that's come out that would affect the way in the process by which you write support letters for prospective graduate students. Nothing in that changes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Steve,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned at 5 o'clock exactly.